Welcome to Unshakeable, the podcast that shares stories of resilience in the face of life's toughest challenges. I'm your host, Siviwe Shakes Soizwapi, and each week we dive into real conversations that not only inspire but help us grow, offering insights on how to navigate our own struggles with strength and purpose. Because resilience isn't about being unbreakable, it's about standing firm when life tries to shake you. This is Unshakeable. Let's get into it. Hello, Unshakeable family. Welcome to week 19. It's been so incredible. And today on this show, we are joined by a remarkable human being whose story literally touched not only my life, but millions of people around the world. Grew up in Lagos, Nigeria. At only 9 years old was when he got a pair of his very first shoes that he put on his feet ever. And there was a missionary, an American missionary that came to Nigeria, bumped into our guest today and his friends who were playing a round of basketball. He won a contest, and the winner of that contest won themselves a pair of shoes. That was the very first pair of shoes that Manny, our guest, wore. And with that little symbol, it wasn't just a pair of shoes, but a symbol of hope to go on and pursue a dream in basketball. With that, he got a scholarship in America where he played basketball and met his remarkable wife, and we're going to get into that as well. And then from there, when he came back to Nigeria to bury his dad, a dream was reignited where he saw the Nigerian community and kids who were living without any pairs of shoes, which brought about the dream of Samaritan's feet, and it brought it to life, where that was the year where it started off, and he's been at it since, changing people's lives, speaking into their lives, and more importantly, putting shoes on their feet. So it's been a remarkable journey for him, and has now run this organization, Samaritan's Feet, not just at an American level, but on a global scale. So today on Unshakeable, I'm so honored and privileged to have Manny OHONME.
I love it.
Emmanuel OHONME.
I love that. Thank you for having me, my brother. It's such a blessing to be on this show today.
Manny, really appreciate it. Thank you so much. And Manny, what makes you unshakable for me is that when you saw the poverty in your country, the kids that were without shoes, you are not only moved, but you took action to it, and there was purpose in that. And then you just decided that from this day forward, yourself and Tracy, the co-founder of Samaritan's Feet, you are now going to put shoes on kids' feet. Can you tell us a little bit more about how Samaritan's Feet came to life?
First and foremost, Shakes, man. To have Shakes have a show called Unshakeable is just amazing to me. I mean, it's just amazing. I'm telling you, and many of us, honestly, live unshakable lives. When you think about our origin story, where many of us have come from, all of us could just crawl up in bed and not want to face the reality of the life. But those things becomes inspiration and motivation that can help catalyze who we are to go do an amazing things in the world. I was a kid that many that probably used to watch Discovery Channel will see and say, hey, that used to be that kid who used to sell things on the streets of Lagos. And I used to sell water and soft drinks to help my mom be able to contribute a little bit to the bottom line of our financial picture. And at the age of 9, my job is to go sell soft drinks to athletes who used to play sports at a park by my house called Road Park, and how God will use our misery and our pain and one day turn into a ministry. And it's crazy that even the word Road Park, the venue that used to be, the commercial point where I used to sell water is now the name for a newer shoe brand called The Row. Just how God could do things. So that's how it began for me. I showed up to go sell water and soft drink. Then that day, I didn't realize I was about to have a date with destiny. There were kids dribbling and playing balls with their hands. And in my neighborhood, everything is round and bounce. We kick them. I said, what in the world are these kids doing? They were playing basketball. So I showed up there, but because I wanted to join them, but because I was a street merchant, they shooed me away to go keep selling my stuff. I ever showed up in a place and they want to remind you don't belong, and that was what I was. But how Providence will have one of the balls rolled by where I was standing. I quickly saw that ball and grabbed it, and I had a decision to make. Do I throw this ball in and let them keep having fun, or do I join them? So sometimes we have to make decisions to not stay on the periphery. One of the greatest things that we could do is to act. And so that day I chose to do something. I acted, I moved, and I joined them. Started playing, and in the middle of this craziness, these missionaries said we're going to have a shooting competition. So the prize for the winner is going to be a new pair of shoes. The place lit up like Christmas tree. Every kid want to get picked, screaming, pick me, pick me, pick me. And I raised my hand, so I was one of the few that got picked that day. Never played basketball in my life. But that shot I took that day, angels took it over. Ended up winning the competition, becoming the first person, not just in my family, but my community, to own a pair of tennis shoes. Changed my life. And this missionary called me to the front. And he was about to present me the shoes, and all I wanted to do was run home. And then he grabbed me by my shoulder, and he said, son, just because all you see around you is poverty doesn't mean the God of the universe has forgotten about you. He said, keep dreaming and keep dreaming big. And he could have told me that day the sky was green, I would have believed it. And after I finished speaking and gave me the shoes, I took off. I ran so fast, Shakes, I forgot my basket of soft drinks and water until I showed up at home. I'm telling you, man. And I showed up at home. Mama looked at me and said, son, where's my water? I said, soft drink. I said, Mama, check out my shoes. And she was happy for me. And I joke around now. 2 minutes later, said, son, you better go bring my water back. You're about to meet Jesus. And it was one of the defining moments of my life, because my home life was somewhat troubled. Because when you live with somebody that struggles with addiction, the ones that are closest to them the most are the ones that hurt the most. And my father struggled a little bit with some of that addiction, alcohol and different things. And when it's time to get high and drunk, guess who he took it out on? Yours truly. And he will say mean and evil things and curse me out and say things, but my mom will come behind him and she'll put her hands on my head and she'll say the name that's above every other name.
Amen.
To us, the name called Jesus. And she'll say, whatever mean and evil thing this man says to my son will never come to pass.
Did you have siblings, man?
Oh, I did. I have 5 sisters.
Yeah.
And I have a biological brother and an adopted brother.
Yes.
So 8 of us grew up in this home with another 3 uncles and another aunt and another relative. So 15 of us grew up in this 1-bedroom place in Lagos, Nigeria. Just a really, really, really humbling place to begin. I joke around. I tell my children that the first bed I ever slept in was when I went to college in America. But we were blessed, right? And so that's how it began with me. And then I'll go to my mom. I said, Mom, why do we have to live so poor? Doesn't God answer prayers? I thought you pray to God. And my mom was so wise. And I joke, every time I speak, I always share this. My mom will point to the window device by my house and say, son, I want you to look outside and tell me what you see. And I tell her, Mom, there are trees. No, son, look higher and tell me what you see. And I say, Mom, I see birds. She says, son, you're not looking high enough. Look much higher and tell me what you see. And I say the clouds. Yeah. And she says, you ever wonder why God created the sky so high? And I say, I don't know, Mom. And she says, so poor birds like you can dream real high. He said, never make an excuse for life. Just because today may be a crappy day doesn't mean tomorrow ain't going to be a great day. As long as my God is on the throne, son, you can do all things.
Would that be the reason why or how you guys survived? How would you say you have survived that upbringing, poverty, and going through life in that way?
My mom's faith, determination, perseverance, resilience, and the spirit of knowing that we were created for something. Even though you could physically see it, but in the spiritual realm, she always want to point us back to remember that God had a purpose for our existence. And that's the thing that make it unshakable for us. Because even if I look at my life story, and I look at my wife's origin story, and I look at my family story, there were odds that we all had to overcome. But God always made a way. even today, I mean, when you think about how I've come through all that journey, going through school, getting a full basketball scholarship to come to America, and getting my undergrad, getting my master's degree, and then getting the technology business, 3 different startups, and then my father, because of his choice to abuse alcohol, eventually caught up with him. He was diagnosed with cirrhosis of the liver. Eventually, I ended up losing his life. But I also want to pause to give God glory, because Amen. 2 weeks before my father passed away, we came to know Christ. But it was a beautiful thing to think that to anyone that's watching this podcast, maybe you know somebody, a family member that you feel like you want to give up on. I want to encourage you not to give up on them, because you don't know what plans God has for them. My mom paid for my dad for almost 40 years. And it was 2 weeks before we went to be with the Lord that he accepted Christ. So please don't give up and keep praying and keep believing. But that's my journey. Yeah. So eventually my father passed away. I had to go back to Nigeria to bury my dad. And I showed up to our home in Nigeria, but because of my father's choice not to take care of a lot of this stuff, our home was somewhat tough. I couldn't even use the bathroom in my own house because he never used some of those resources to help take care of what it was supposed to be. I went across the street, and my family's been to where I grew up, where we used to sell water. And the park right next to it, and you went and use the restroom at that park. I came back home, and coming out of that place, you saw these kids, because our house was literally right next to a park, and these kids had no shoes. They didn't have hope, and I remember how I felt like when the missionary gave me a pair of shoes, but it was like eventually I learned that over 300 million kids didn't have shoes in Nigeria. I had to come back to America because my wife and I have been dreaming and thinking about what could we also do to impact the world through our journey. But it was pretty cool because we thought it was going to be more than not just shoes. We had a vision to actually help restore people that come from broken homes and families because of divorce, because my wife comes from a home that was affected and infected with the spirit of divorce. And so we thought we would go get trained as family dynamics counselors to help young couples, people that struggle with divorce. But we knew we also loved sports, because sports was a catalyst that helped change our lives. So we want to be able to have a sports related ministry, and because I played basketball, so we created this idea called JC Jam Fest. We actually piloted it right here in South Africa, actually, all jokes aside. And then we want to be able to provide shoes. So those became the 3-legged stool we thought would be our ministry. At that time, we thought it was actually, the ministry was called Legacy of the Vine, and Samaritan was one of the components of this ministry. But as I came back from Nigeria, and we got allowed us to start this ministry 5 years later, which there was actually stories beyond that, which I hope we get into, because everybody always gives me the credit that I started Samaritan's Feet, but there was a time that I was actually saying, I don't know if I want to go do this, man, because it's going to cost me something. God used my wife to encourage me to be obedient to the call, and that's why we're here today. Because
I want you to go into that Samaritan's Feet story and the impact that Tracy played in getting it off the ground, and how she's played a pivotal role in how far it's come as well. Before you get there, I want to ask you, your dad, who is supposed to be a hero, and how did that impact you, and who then were your male role models that kind of spearheaded and trailblazed the way for you?
My father, when I was a little kid, he was a different man. And I know when you think about the challenges and struggles that people go through, pressures always reveals. People always talk about the power of adversity. It reveals what's already inside. And it's not, my his father had 3 wives. He died when he was a young kid, 16 and a half years old, getting ready to graduate high school. He had to take on the responsibility of training his siblings, which there were many numbers, and take care care of his, stepmothers and his mother. He became a grave digger right after I finished high school and got a job to learn horticulture so when the pressure of life came to him, rather than something pushing him closer to Christ, he needed to escape. He pushed him to the bottle. But before he discovered the bottle, he was a different man. He loved me, but after the spirit of the alcohol overcame him, he became a different person. And it was tough growing up there, but thank God that God gave me the opportunity to live. He had to take me to a place called North Dakota, which is the coldest place in the world, by the way. But thank God he sent me there, because he allowed me to go meet my future bride that January 2nd I'll be married to her for 33 years.
Wow.
I mean, it's amazing.
Wow.
Blessed me with 4 amazing children. But there was a man when I showed up in North Dakota, a family that I didn't even know from Adam, that picked me up on the street of Devil's Lake, North Dakota, that took me to my campus. That man called Larry Mosier became my adopted father. I saw how he loved his wife. I saw how he served his wife, how he served his family. I mean, this is a guy that takes garbage out and just oozes of love on his wife and honors. I said, I want to be like that man. If that's what fatherhood is, that was the man that taught me how to be a father. And it's this Caucasian, amazing man that became my dad. He came to all my games. He encouraged me. I spent a lot of weekends with him. His kids that got to be my little younger brother. I was this African kid being, older brother to these 3 white kids. But it was amazing to see the beauty. Actually, there was a true story, because I don't know who was watching this, because God always brings people into your life for a reason. I was this African kid that stepped in these people's life, and here's how I know that prejudice is something that's taught, because these young kids, they were so pure in heart. They didn't even know I was black. They see me. This is how different it is. There's a younger kid, he's now 40 years old now, Kellen Mosier. I remember it was about 3 or 4 years old at that time. There was a show called The Jeffersons, and he was watching this show on TV, and one day I was there the weekend, and he watched the screen. He looked at the screen and he looked at George Jefferson, and he looked at me. And he looked at George Jefferson, and he looked at me. He said, "Manny, you're black." I said, "Oh no."
That was the first time
he realized that. But the pureness of his heart, he just saw me as his older brother. But it was the coolest thing. I remember sharing that story at his wedding. It was just unbelievable. But that's the power of how God can bring you into your life, enrich their life while they enrich my life. And I'm a better husband today to my bride because of Larry Mosier. He was a coach. He was a teacher, but he was also a leader.
Yeah.
And I learned those examples from him. And other men that came into my life, my coaches and different types of things, this is what got me to where I am. So that's where the inspiration came from. But then when you think about going back to the earlier thing, the role that my wife has played in this journey is pretty amazing. Because if you think about where we were chasing the American dream.
Yeah.
I was blessed. I got the chance to be part of 3 amazing software startups that's in the tech space. My last startup, that I was involved in, we went and raised a bunch of resources through these venture capitalists that came into our world, and with this new VC out of New York, they saw these young guys in their early 30s. They said, "Man, this guy needs some adult supervision, man. We're not going to provide all these resources to these young cats and go blow it away." And so they brought these gray-haired guys, and we call them like that now. We joke around to kind of provide some wisdom, and one of the guys that came was my new boss, Jay Rollins, and Jay was a guy that when he brought him in, we want to be able to expand that product footprint, because I think this is a very important part of my story that I think people need to know. So we actually were looking to go buy a company out of Dallas, Texas. So we had to go ahead of time to go do due diligence to go kind of check them out. So we went to Dallas with Jay, but because we came the night before, I said, "Well, let's go get some tickets to go watch this NBA game that was happening, and 2 of our favorite players were playing on the opposite team." So we went, and we were sitting right before the game started, and Jay looked at me and said, "Manny, if money wasn't an issue, how would you change the world?" And I said, I've been set up. And I'm like,
question.
I'm telling you. So I started talking to him about this vision we had about being able to provide shoes for kids and washing their feet. And the more I spoke, the more animated and excited I got.
Yeah.
And after listening to me for 20 minutes, he said, Manny, why are you here? And when your boss asks you why you're here, you change the subject. You know what I'm saying? So I quickly said, I don't know. So I'm like, God, let this game start. I don't want to keep this conversation going. And all of a sudden the buzzer hits. And I said, I don't have to talk to this guy about this anymore. But I didn't realize he filed that conversation away. Imagine a few weeks later, my wife and a group of ladies chose to go to a Joyce Meyer's conference.
Before I interrupt you, and I'm going to remember Joyce Meyer, where did you meet her?
Oh,
then we're gonna get to the impact.
You know, because
we need that story.
I met my wife in college. So she was a freshman. I was a sophomore playing for the basketball team. And when you have a good-looking guy like this, it's hard. It's hard. But here's the truth.
Do you have pictures?
The truth. Oh, trust me. Like my wife, actually, I ran for snow days, which is kind of like, I don't know what they'll call it here. It's like a court where different clubs, like a homecoming deal, where they sponsor different people, and you dress up in your tux, and they vote for you to see who's the king and the queen of your campus. So I ended up becoming the snow days king, and so at that snow days event, I got a chance to dance with my future bride, and talk to her, and she works in the library on campus. So I want to be a good student, so I go study. You know what I'm saying?
So diligent, Manny.
So I was a real good student. I studied her very well. So we end up dating, and after 2 years at that school, I transferred to the biggest city in the state, and transferred to another college called Concordia, because I thought I was going to go actually get an international business and international relations degree. And then after she graduated, actually funny, she became this queen the following year, so I had to come back and crown her.
Amazing.
So it's just a beautiful thing. So you go to our alma mater, you see our pictures on the wall. So we're like this snow days king and queen, and just a fairy tale story. But then after I finished college there, 2 weeks later or so, we got married, which was actually the 2nd of January, I think it's 1993 was when we got married, and man, she hasn't been able to shake me loose. I mean, she's just
she can try.
She can try, but I'm going nowhere anymore. But it's been a blessing. So been together with her 35 years, 33 years, been married, 4 amazing children, 32, 29, and we have I think a 26-year-old and a son. We have 3 girls, and our son is turning 24 in February. So very blessed. And so that's how I met her, and just a God sent into my life. I mean, just always trying to help find the best and do the best and support me in every way possible. I still joke around when she was the one that could earn income in those days, and I'll come back and visit her in hometown. She'll slip $20 in my pocket and say, "Come on, girl." I didn't realize she's a great investor. She was looking for a long-term return, and she got it. But she's amazing. She's amazing. But that's how I met her.
Sorry to interrupt you there with that one. You can now tell us about Joyce Meyer.
But that's how he started, and so Tracy was invited by a friend of hers from church to go to this Joyce Meyer conference about 90 miles from where we live. So, and then the lady also invited, I think, 4 other ladies. So there were about 6 ladies that drove down the van. Now, don't get Tracy to get in the van anymore, because they drove down the van, and they went down to Greensboro to a Joyce Meyer's conference. And there was a lady that was part of the team that God literally used to read Tracy's mail. didn't know anything about us, shared some stuff with Trace that we've never told a soul, some visions of things that we've had that God's revealed to us, how she saw a convoy of trucks that God was amassing as resources to go impact the world for our King. And she had a bunch of other things, how Tracy was supposed to not be in the backseat anymore, moving her to the front, how God, just like how called and used Esther, and God was going to use her and her family, and then she did something crazy. She asked Tracy if she could serve her, and she had a bottle of Deer Park water and started to wash Tracy's feet. Sure. We've never told anybody that's going to be a tool that we're going to use to help impact the world. God was giving her a foreshadowing of what was to come. It's just a beautiful thing. Came home and said, honey, we've been disobedient. And then you've been married now. And when you walk into a house, your wife look at you, you know if it's going to be a good day or a bad day. And I knew I was in trouble. And she said, honey, we've been disobedient. And I said, what's wrong? And she shared what she shared. I was like, holy cow. And I know one thing. There's a beach close to by where I live. It's kind of Tracy's superpower. I knew if I could get her there, and whatever I tell her, she forgets about the world. But not that day. I took her to Charleston Soccer, thinking, man, we're going to go dream and talk about it. But no, I just didn't want her to bring all this idea about this calling business. And then right before we got ready to go eat at this restaurant, Tracy said, what is it going to take for you to leave your job? I said, woman, I thought we'll come here, have a good time. And it's crazy, like that day I said something crazy, because I thought, if we can actually save a little extra money, we can get about 6 months of income. That maybe we can actually, with what we got savings, we can actually extend it for a couple of years or so. I wish I said something else that day, because I didn't realize there was some other voice that was listening. Fast forward 2 days later, I went back to the office. That guy, Jay, that we went to Dallas together, after I finished talking to all the people across our company that sells, I walked into his office. I said, do you want to go grab a bite to eat lunch? He said, I'm going to come into my office, and he shuts the door. And every time, Joe never shuts the door when he talks to me. and he said, Manny, actually, I know this other gentleman that the VC, the venture capitalist firm, was going to bring in, was actually going to have this conversation, but I felt we connected when we went down in Dallas. He said, man, I'm going to cut to the chase. The VC wants to bring in a new president to take over actually the founder's role and my role and a couple of people's role. He said, I know you're pretty smart, you can move into services, but I saw the passion in your eyes when you were sharing about that stuff. I said, what if I can help you start that organization? I said, what the heck are you talking about? And he said, I think I can give you this amount of money. It was exactly that 6 months I told Tracy on Saturday. And I remember, I lost it. And then Jay said he's a Christian. I said, man, don't tell me you're a Christian. If you're a Christian, you don't take my job, And, so I was so mad. I walked out of that office that day. I called that day my Black Monday. But I didn't realize that was going to be the best day of my life. And I remember walking out of that office, picking up the phone and calling Tracy. He said, I think I just lost my job. And she said, what do you mean you think? And then she could probably hear in my voice that I was crying. And she said, come home. And she encouraged me that day. And that was the beginning of my obedience because of her support, her encouragement. And I could have, after that, we knew we had responsibilities. We could have gone back to work for the software companies, but she's the one that kept reminding me that God's called us to something much bigger. That you should stay the course. And it's crazy to think about. That was 2003, but some of the stories that just happened through that process. So I left there. A few days later, we decided to go start this organization called Samaritan's Feet, with a vision to put shoes to the feet of 10 million people. And then that ministry, we talk about the marriage retreats to help people who struggle to marry, and then the sports. But God started blessing Samaritan's Feet. And then one of my board members at that day, Frank Canador, I remember still telling me, he said, Manny, pour yourself into whatever it is that God's blessing in your life. So we chose to pour ourselves all into Samaritan's feet, and that vision to go put shoes on the feet of 10 million in 2023, we came back to where we started at Mitchell's Plain and served that 10 million person. So 20 years later, we've now served over 10 million. At the end of this year, we'll serve our 12th million in about 113 countries, 650 plus U.S. cities and communities. And a couple years ago, we started a whole new social enterprise that's now manufacturing shoes. These shoes I'm actually wearing is manufactured at a factory in Ghana. That's now created over, I think 200 and something jobs full time that works at a factory. Direct and indirect jobs, over 1,000 in the community, with a capacity to be able to manufacture 5 million shoes a year. So it took us 20 years to serve 10 million. Now we have a factory that can generate profit with profits to be able to help us impact more people with no shoes, to be able to create a world with zero shoeless people. So it's just amazing what God is doing. He's taking my pain, my misery, and it's turning into a ministry, but now it's turning into a social enterprise, a business, with hopes one day being able to also create future shoepreneurs, entrepreneurs that can become distributors and franchise operators to help us be distributors of the shoes across the continent and one day across the world.
Was the first distribution in Mitchell's Plain, South Africa?
The first distribution we did was in Mitchell's Plain, South Africa in 2003.
You were living in America?
I was living in America. I still remember Tracy, myself, and a group of unbelievable people that came with us.
Why South Africa?
It's actually, I had a friend who was also doing ministry that's been coming to actually Mitchell's Plains. They built the Frog Center, fully relying on God's Center sports complex there. And when I told him my vision, what I was going to do, he said, I got a perfect place for you. And he called me out of the blue one day, said, we're going to South Africa and I want you to come. I said, no, I'm not ready. He said, you will never be ready. And God, even though may call you unqualified, He'll qualify you for what He's called you for. So don't worry about what you're not ready for. So that's how we came. And Tracy and I brought a group of people and didn't realize it. And over, I think after we finished distributing 1,000 shoes, shakes, there was probably a couple of thousand people still in line. And that's when I realized, people were throwing their children over the fence because of shoes. It's crazy to think about the need. I said, man, we will come back. I still remember Pastor John Pasco saying, man, you've created problems for me. and you need to go talk to them. I had to go out there and talk to them and just to see what God has done. Now we've come back, and now to come back 20 years later to come serve our 10th million person. And at that distribution, one of the police officers that actually came to come provide security, and he showed up on site. I realized these people. He turned out that he was one of the kids in the community that we used to put shoes on. He said, these are the people that used to put shoes on us. And he remembers Samaritan's feet. And I remember at the end of our distribution, we were talking to all the volunteers, and that Tim was the last one to speak. And he got up. He said, you don't remember me. I was a little kid that you guys gave a pair of shoes to. And now I'm serving. I'm a police officer. I just want to thank you, because that was a defining moment in my life too.
Incredible. You were moved by compassion, and I said in the beginning that's what made you unshakable, because also you saw the situation that you were in, and you saw it in the world when you went back to Nigeria. When you kick-started it, obviously there must have been challenges. Do you mind just getting into a few of those, even if it's one challenge that you think is the biggest?
Well, I think when you think about it, everybody always look at the mountaintop moments. When we started, we thought we had enough money that would last us for a couple of years, making we were stretched. And all of a sudden, it was like God opened season, because we were worshiping a bank account. And God is a jealous God, and He needs to be the King and the Lord over your life. My daughter, we didn't have the fancy insurance anymore. Woke up in the middle of the night. She had appendix rupturing, and you had to pay. Tracy was taking one of my daughters to a birthday party. Some person ran the stop sign, T-boned our car. Totaled our vehicle. A few days later, I'm going to, no, actually, I was the first one. I was going to meet somebody at a meeting, and we had ice in our city that day where the water turned to ice by where we live. Ran through, lost control of my car through the median. 5 vehicles later, they thought I was dead. I mean, total our vehicle. And then a couple of days later, Tracy taking somebody to a birthday party. This lady ran. Total lock. I still remember her calling me saying I need a ride. I said, this is not funny, and I had to call one of my friends, his Asian brother, said, you mind if I borrow your car? I need to go pick. He said, what's wrong? He said, my wife was in an accident. He said, you guys have a bad driving record. I'm not going to let you have my car. and honestly, and the straw that broke the camel's back was Tracy went to the grocery store to go buy groceries. And I think the bill was $14 and something. So I can't remember exact, but she couldn't even come up with $2. And she called me and said, "What are you doing to me?" And I don't even remember. There was a guy, a very famous preacher in this stage called Tony Evans. He was actually speaking that day on the radio, and I didn't remember anything Tony Evans said, but I remember him saying, "Sometimes God would allow our life to hit rock bottom, but remember who is the rock." At the bottom. And that day something broke in my spirit that reminds me of a passage of scripture that said a broken and a contrite spirit he won't despise. And from that day on, it was like something shifted and opportunities started coming and because God realized now he's broken, I can use him.
Yes.
Because it's no longer about me.
Yes.
It was about him. And there was a lot of stories and how it came about, raising the shoes, how God donated over 1 million pairs of shoes for us when we went on the NBA on TNT with Charles Barkley, and how God made that possible, walked 300 miles barefoot to create awareness. And one of the shoe companies donated 2 million shoes. We didn't have warehouse. I mean, imagine getting over 1 million shoes where you only had one. Wow. When you start in your garage and then you got to move into, and all of a sudden think about today having a headquarters that's a campus with over 16 acres and now a factory in Ghana that's a business. If you're watching today and God's called you to something much bigger than you, I just want to challenge you. Stay faithful. Because everything that's great always starts with a humble beginning.
Yep.
It starts small. So never despise those humble beginnings. Yep. But the key is to stay faithful. God honors faithfulness. And he who sees what you're doing in secret, I promise you, one day will reward you openly.
Amen. I wanted to ask you, Manny, you had this vision and you do distribute the shoes. Why don't you just go to an area, drop the shoes off and leave? Why is it important for you to sit down across from the person that you're giving the shoe to? You wash their feet, you look them in the eye, you speak life over them, you hear what their dreams are, and you pray for them at the end. Why is that interaction so important?
Well, it is because Christ modeled that to him. When we at Samaritans, we believe in inspiring hope. And hope for us is 4-letter acronym. It's to help improve health. So, which is to help wash the feet as a symbol, to be able to actually teach them hygiene, but also to teach what Christ taught us. He said the greatest amongst you must be a servant. So we want to be a model to these young people, because greatness got to come from a disposition of servanthood. Because one day some of those kids who know may be the future president of this country, future premier, future CEO, one day you're going to be great. But always remember the importance of serving others, because when you serve others, that's when you truly understand the true essence of joyfulness and gratitude and dignifying people. So then creating an opportunity and then able to advocate for peace and access to education. That's why we do it, because those kids will never forget you. When you grab their dirty feet, even today we were just served about 1,000 people and we washed their feet, and when they have wound, you bandage their wound, you remember their name, you remember their dreams, you speak hope, you pray over them. They will never forget that.
Ever.
But more importantly, God uses that to change your life too. It's a mutually transformative experience that we all live. Change and transform. Even the people watching, their lives are changed too. And that's the power of Samaritan's feet. So when we talk about why are we Good Samaritans, because it's not just about changing that life. It's the ecosystem of everybody connected, from the one that gave to the one that served to the one that came to volunteer. All our lives have changed.
Yeah, no, incredible. Also on that point, I wanted to hear from you what keeps that same energy, whereas you've put the shoe on someone's foot and had that engagement and interaction from day one. And it's been how many years? I think over 20 years now, since 2003, that you've been doing it, and people part of Samaritan's Feet have been doing it. What makes it today to have the same? Because I'm honored enough to know that it's still very much the same. Each distribution is the same, and everyone that is part of it gives the same energy and bought into the vision. How do you keep consistent in that interaction, lowering yourself and serving people, and not kind of doing it by the way?
There's a very famous quote that says, "Service to others emancipates humanity from the dungeon of themselves." So when you learn to serve, it's a powerful thing. Tracy and I get to have an amazing executive leadership team that we work with every single day. Now CEOs in other countries that are affiliates of, like in South Africa, in Ghana, Nigeria, and Argentina, different places around the world. But the feel for us is when we get the chance. I always love training while I watch Tracy serve. She never sits on the chair; she sits on the floor.
Yeah, I saw her today. She was right on the
floor. For me, the joyfulness, because I don't know who I'm getting to serve. I'm getting to maybe potentially serve the person that's going to come up with a cure for cancer. Maybe the next. Shaky Shakes. Maybe for real. Maybe the next, captain of the soccer team for South Africa. But I want to pour so much love into them. There was a girl, three girls that said, "I want to be a doctor." And I said, Dr. Joy, I said, in the next 20 years, I hope I come back and visit. And if I get a little cold, I'm calling you because I want you to treat me. And I'll be watching TV and I'll see on CNN and say, they rejoice. I remember coming to Sir Lowry Pass and I got the chance to wash your feet. And you reminded me that day for what God has placed in your heart. And you spoke into life, and I agreed with you. And now that agreement, we want to continue to believe it. Don't give up on that dream. And that's the power. That's what fuels me to see hope come alive.
No, incredible. And I see that every day. And like I said, being honored to be a part of it. And a day like today, to not only witness you and Tracy being there, but also serving as well. It's so infectious, and it's very contagious as well. You mentioned the policeman at Mitchell's Plain. Is there an interaction or engagement that stands out for you in this 20 plus years that you can maybe share with us?
There's plenty. You talk
Just one.
You talk about that police. You talk about a young kid that Tracy and I met at an orphanage in Nigeria called Ibrahim. That his life was so radically changed. We asked him what his dream. He said, "I want to do what you do."
Sure.
Tracy and I ended up, besides providing shoes for him, we ended up scholarshiping him to come to school in South Africa, and he became part of YWAM. Was trained, was successful. They transferred him to the United States because he was so good at what he did. And after he was there in Orlando for a while, he called me one day and said, "I want to come work for you." And Tracy and I ended up flying him to Charlotte, join our team as part of our staff, and amazing. The work that he did, and then got married and has now 3 or 4 children of their own, and to see how God has used this kid's life. He began through a pair of shoes, and we've seen, if you come into our headquarters, you see the story of Procy, this lady in Uganda that used to make baskets for a living, and our team saw the desire. She wanted our kids to go to school, so they created a scholarship fund so their kids can finish elementary school, college, and it asks what the kids do. Want to be a doctor, want to be a pilot. And then through our ecosystem, we know people that can get them into a medical school, someone that can get them into. So one day, we'll be able to see these kids that we put shoes on in Uganda, that'll be flying planes. That'll be doctors. doctors,
Yeah.
there'll be lawyers, there'll be engineers, future presidents, governors. But the beauty of it is they will not forget that this began because a good Samaritan came, washed their feet, and inspired them to dream. And the pair of shoes became a catalyst to change and transform their lives.
Yeah,
Just
I
like
love that. It's not about the pair of shoes. It's not about the numbers or the statistics. The question that follows then automatically to me is, how do you measure success?
You know, to me, my success is measured by lives transformed. The ultimate measure of success for me is not just the fact that they got a pair of shoes, but that hope gets activated. I get the chance to introduce some of those kids to the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords. I get the chance to ask him, you know, what's the worst thing that's ever happened to you, and what's your dream? And I can tell them that I know the one that can take away your pain. And I serve the ones that has the key to unlock the possibility of your future, and his name is Jesus. And I think that's what the true measure of success, because what does it profit the man to gain the whole world and lose your soul? And that's what Tracy and I, the legacy that we want to live, that we loved and that we served. But we also were a conduit and a bridge that connect the people to our King.
Well, you guys are doing an incredible work, and it's just remarkable to follow along and to see it happening. With people that are listening now, there is a listener, I know. There's someone sitting there listening to this conversation, and they also feel like they're called to make a difference, and they just don't know where to start. What would you say to them?
Just start. You know, the greatest thing that anyone can do in life is just begin. There's a very famous Chinese proverb that said the journey of 1,000,000 miles begins with one step. Put the first step in front of each other. Just be obedient. Identify what the need is. Be willing to contribute to it. See, but whatever it is, make sure the stuff is audacious. It could be small, but don't dream too small. Dream big. But if you stay faithful and start doing it, all of a sudden you look behind them, there'll be other people walking along the path with you. Because when they see you committed, willing to sacrifice, willing to go the extra mile, even when nobody else will go with you. My wife used to tell me that, what if nobody goes with us? We will still continue doing this. And I think that's the true essence of this. Be willing to do it. I said, I'm willing to go all the way for Jesus. Even with no man comes, we're still gonna go.
Amen.
But God keeps bringing it. So if God has called you, just start. Start doing. Start loving. Start giving. Start going. Eventually, God will bring your helpers. Because if God brings the vision, He'll bring the provision. And we've seen it live that day in and day. I mean, how does a guy with no shoes now manufacture shoes? How does a guy with no shoes now deal with world leaders? I mean, just in New York, just a few weeks ago, we launched a partnership with the Organization of African First Lady. 54 potential members of the African countries, part of that coalition, now will adopt the world shoe as a platform, a mission accelerator to partner with the Minister of Health, Minister of Education, to use that as a way to work with girls and boys in their country to be able to impact, to activate hope, help them go to school, help prevent disease, so we can create a world, not just with shoeless children, but also a world that we can eradicate neglected tropical disease. That's why we're doing this. The shoes actually, it's got an active antimicrobial in there. It's actually, it's got medicine in the shoe.
Wow.
It's green, it's eco-friendly, so it's biodegradable. So how powerful can a shoe? God will use a no-name kid with no shoe and give him a vision and the partner to come together to create something that no one can take credit for. Because we used to say, Almighty God, there is no name. He would never share his glory with anyone.
That's God.
That's amazing. And it's not just you giving shoes, but it's you giving Jesus to all of these kids and showing, who Jesus really is. Your relationship with Jesus, when did that start? And when did you get to a place whereby you're so tight?
Well, my relationship with Christ actually began through this evangelist that that used to go door to door prayer walking in Nigeria to the Foursquare Gospel Church. They knocked on our door one day and they invited us to church. My dad was a practicing animist. Every so often we'll go to a Catholic church because that's just something to do. My mom was a converted Anglican. So she said, "Hey, you guys can go." And we went. And it was like we saw Christ came alive. And then every August they take us to this camp. And I was like, I was going to London because we get to have 3 meals a day. and for, it's amazing. And we get to experience Christ. And that's where my faith grew. And I dedicated my life to Christ at those camp. I still remember somebody said, "Where did you learn to speak?" When I gave my life to Christ, I was on fire for God. I'll be on the public transportation in Lagos. I'm one of those kids that will get up in the bus and start talking about Jesus. That's now, I can stand in front of people in Burundi with hundreds of thousands of people, or I can stand in front of a university audience or our conference with thousands of people and proclaim the name of Christ. Amen. But do it in such a way not to offend, but do it with such love from a business lens, but also from a leadership lens, or from a social enterprise lens, to be able to teach and show the world that our God owns it all and is prepared us for whatever it is that is called us into. The key is we need to say yes. Whatever that is, say yes. And that's where my journey of Christ began.
Before I ask you the last question, I want to hear from Tracy, because I saw that you were sitting on the ground today, where everyone else, including myself, was sitting on a chair. What started that? What sparked it within you? And why do you keep doing it?
I could say it was this great spiritual awakening, but it wasn't. For me, first started was my back. Right? Honestly, to be honest, it was my back. But for me too, I always want that child to be on a pedestal, because I know, as Emmanuel said, we both came from backgrounds that were not great. I know what it's like standing in line. In the U.S., we call it government assistance, right? They might have rations in Cuba, or they may have whatever they're giving for people here for milk for babies, right? For me, when my parents divorced and my dad left us with a year's bond to pay on a home, I was one of the older two, all the way from 14 to 2. My younger brother was, so I knew what standing in line for government cheese, government powdered milk.
Yes.
And I hated feeling like I was what everybody knew what poor was. So for me, sitting on the floor, and Emmanuel mentioned it a minute ago, for me, the highlight of sharing Christ and sharing hope is also, I want that child to know I remember Faith's name, that I served her today. Because God, whether our parents gave us the name or not, God gave all of us our name. God gave all of us our purpose.
Yes.
We are all uniquely and wonderfully made. And regardless of what sometimes our own families say about us, regardless of what society or the world or the season that we feel in, though it sometimes feels like a sentence, it's a season. I want to leave knowing that whether we've done 12 million, it's still one. It's the power of one.
Yeah.
It's the power of Dave that went to Nigeria, that I know won the contest and got his first pair of shoes.
Yeah.
It's one person stepping out and stepping forward and doing it with dignity, because we all know, I never want any child to feel like, because I have less than in this moment, means I am less than as a human.
Yes.
And so for me, it started with my back, but it's my preference, because they're sitting on that chair, and sometimes we're looking eye to eye. Sometimes they're looking down at me when I'm talking to them. I don't care. I want them to know in that moment, whether that's 5 minutes or 10, they're the most important person in that room that I'm sitting in front of.
Incredible. Thank you for that. 2 more questions, man. Sorry, I can't let you go without me asking you to please just. First question. Okay, it's 3 now. 3 questions. The first question is Mommy still alive?
Yeah, Mom is still alive.
Amazing. Second question is, what message do you have for her today?
You're gonna make me cry.
Tell about your name. I thought that's where you were going to go when you talked about your first opportunity to know Christ, even though you were in the womb.
You know, like I said, my father struggled a little bit with alcoholism, and he had his friend that he used to party and drink with. You know, when my mom was pregnant with me, I want to thank her for being obedient to God, for following God blindly, because you know, the medicine man in Nigeria, they used to tell my mom if my mom didn't do sacrifice, the baby she was carrying was going to be killed. And my mom said, "You don't know my Jesus." You know, it's crazy. She told me a story when I was, before I was born, that one day my father was gone, and we lived in this one bedroom in this community kind of place, and she said she heard the main door to our house open, and there was a step that was coming towards our door, and she was woken up, and I believe that was a defining moment, an unshakable moment for my life, because she said she called my dad's name a couple of times, there was no response, and then as that step came closer to where she was, she said she felt the hair on the back of her head rise, and she knew this wasn't the Holy Spirit. But she remembered what the missionary that led her to Christ said, that every time you encounter fear, call the name of Jesus. She said all she could muster was, in the name of Jesus, whatever it is that's coming towards my door, I command you to turn around and leave. And she said with the intensity that step kept coming, she heard it turn around and left. And she said, "Jesus, save me." And she said, "Jesus, if you allow me to have this baby," she said, "if this baby is a boy," she said, "I'm going to name him Emmanuel, because tonight my God was with me." And you know, 6 months later, this good looking and she always told me I was going to serve God. But the beauty of this was, this last July, I took my mom and my sisters to a factory in Ghana. And I still remember my mom walked in just weeping and praying over everybody. He said, "My God is a miracle worker." Emmanuel was obedient to God. So I just want to thank her for believing and for pouring faith and hope into my life so I can go live out my purpose.
Incredible. I think I almost didn't want to ask the last question, but that's incredible to hear, Manny, because our moms, they are pillars of our homes, even though our dads are the heads of the homes. But the last question was just, what's next for Samaritan's Feet?
You know, a Samaritan's Feet 2.0 began right after we finished serving our 10th million, because we can't, solve the problem, this audacious problem that God has given us to go eradicate foodborne disease and create a world with zero shoeless people by just solving it through the lens of charity. Charity can't solve it by itself. And we know at a stage that Africa can't just be dependent on aid. We need development. We need profit-making ventures that can help deliver that promise of advancing prosperity to Africans. 1.4 billion on our continent, projected to be 2.4 billion in the next 20 or so years. 1 in 3 or 4 employable person in Africa is going to be an African in the world. We need to be a driver for that. That's why we went out and raised $20 million to go start a factory in Ghana. That's why we went and created 1,000 direct and indirect jobs. That's where we're training people and create for-profit social enterprises that can generate profits, uplift people out of poverty, and go create the next generation middle class. That's where the opportunity comes in, the hope. If we can create opportunity for people that they can then buy the shoes for their kids. If we can create the opportunity for retailers to be able to see that the craftsmanship, the ability to be able to create things with excellence that could be purchased in Europe, in America, in Asia, in Australia, other parts of the world, that the greatest innovation can come out of our continent, and we can create innovation around footwear, around medicine, around healthcare, different types of things that can eradicate foodborne disease. That on our watch, that we can truly eradicate a problem. How do you call a problem that affects 1.5 billion people neglected? So we want to change that phrase. We want to change that phrase. The next chapter for Samaritan's Feet is a chapter that we will continue to be that orange thread that delivers hope through the gift of shoes and wash people's feet. But we can create world shoe enterprises and that can actually manufacture shoes, that can actually distribute shoes, shoepreneurs, that can actually have retailers across the world selling these shoes so we can generate profit. So when we solve the shoe problem, well, let's go figure out the next problem to go solve.
Amazing. Manny, you've been incredible, and as always, always an honor just to share a conversation with you. Tracy, thank you so much. I think it was an incredible episode, and looking forward to the feedback and just how the Unshakeable family enjoyed it. But you know what to do. You just need to subscribe to the channel and follow along. I really think this episode will be one that impacts you tremendously. Well, we'll catch you next time on the next episode of Unshakeable. Cheers.
Thanks for tuning into Unshakeable. If today's story moved you, inspired you, or gave you something to think about, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Remember, resilience isn't about being unbreakable. It's about staying rooted when the world shakes. If you haven't already, hit follow, leave a review, and help us grow this community of resilient voices. Until next time, stay grounded, stay growing, stay unshakable.